Hey everyone, I'm Tejas Pisapati, and I'm back with another episode of the Dialog at UX Coffee Hours. This week, I'm going to talk to one of my friends and a former colleague, Steve Schirra. Steve and I work together at Yahoo, and he's one of the best researchers I've ever worked with. Steve is currently a UX research manager at YouTube, and he focuses on watch page. Before joining YouTube, he built a research team at Twitch, and Steve has a couple of masters, one from MIT in comparative media, and one from Emerson College in arts. Today, we're going to ask him a few questions we pulled in from the community around the importance of grad school in UX research careers. Hey, Steve, welcome to the Dialogue at UX Coffee Hours.
Thanks for having me.
Thank you so much for joining us today. Before we get started, can you please introduce yourself and tell us who you are and what you do?
Yeah, so I'm a user research manager at YouTube. And as you mentioned, I work on the watch experience. So it's thinking about how users watch YouTube and kind of all the features that support finding something to watch next, adjusting that video, and just learning more about the video. So I work on all those features.
Awesome. Thank you so much. Let me give you a quick update on where UX Coffee Hours is today. We have more than 140 mentors from 60 plus companies globally. And we have been having a lot of coffee chats with aspiring UX people, and then we pulled in those questions. I'm going to ask you 3 of those questions in our session today, okay? And those questions are around importance of grad school in UX research careers, and also we want to hear about your journey into UX research. Are we good?
Yeah, great.
Awesome. Let's get started with the first one. How did you get into UX research?
This is one of those questions, I think, when you ask someone in UX research, they'll say, I had kind of a weird path, and I'm definitely one of those people. So I did my master's in writing, and at that time, when I finished grad school, I thought I'd be a writing instructor. So I was doing living that adjunct life, teaching courses at a few colleges, and I kind of got connected with a professor who was working in the civic engagement, designing new technologies and experiences, and started working there part-time. It really interested me. And I learned that I was much more passionate about that than my academic career. And I was able to turn that into a full-time job, working in that lab, designing new types of experiences, and which prompted me to want to go back to school and kind of formalize my training in research methods, learn more about design. And so I did that. And now, since then, I've been back here in the Bay Area working at different tech companies in UX research. So kind of one of those windy paths, but to me, it all makes sense in the end. And that's a story you'll hear from a lot of people, I think, in this industry.
That's awesome. It's really interesting how you actually came from writing to UX research. So let me ask you this question, because one of the key stops in your journey is getting a grad school degree, right? So
Right.
How helpful is a master's or PhD if someone wants to get into UX research as a career? Let's break it down separately, master's and PhD. And I want to hear your thoughts on what do you think about both these options?
Yeah, actually, let me take it one step higher first, which I think is just an advanced degree versus just an undergraduate degree. And I think just on that note, I'd highly recommend it, with some exceptions. But I think in general, undergraduates don't necessarily always get the opportunity to apply their knowledge of research methods, and that applied experience is really, really important. So you want experience designing your own studies, working with human research subjects, communicating the results with people outside of academia. And you just want a strong understanding, just groundwork of all those different methods that you're learning. And that's really where the advanced degree can be helpful. So it gives you focused training in research methods. You can work with senior faculty members on some of their projects, potentially publish. And there's a lot of different programs, I think, that are applicable to someone that wants to do user research. So human-computer interaction, design research, there's programs in applied anthropology or applied psychology, and those are all viable tracks. And I think just on that note, so yes, I would recommend it. I think if you're looking to get into this career, you want to work in industry, look for programs that have faculty that maybe span both academia and industry to make sure you're getting that experience. And overall, I think for for myself and a lot of people I talked to in industry, that master's degree was really the first time they got to focus on those methods and really apply them. Whereas with their undergrad, they didn't. It's one of those things that's not, you don't have to. It's definitely an advantage. And for me, it was personally helpful.
Great. So you build teams in a couple of companies, right? So from when you were looking at resumes from candidates that you are trying to hire, would it make a big difference if the candidate has a master's or a PhD, or can you tell us a little more about how you look at a candidate with a PhD versus a candidate without a PhD?
Yeah, and I think coming from academia, the master's PhD dichotomy was like huge, where if you just had your master's, there's a whole class of jobs you just weren't able to apply to. You didn't have the qualifications. It's just not the case in UX research, in my experience. So if I'm a hiring manager and I'm looking at someone fresh out of a master's degree, fresh out of a PhD, to me, they're both entry-level candidates, and the PhD hasn't fast-tracked that PhD graduate into a job any faster. And one other thing to think about too is the difference in program length. So the master's is 2 years, the PhD could be 4 to 6 years. So that master's student can finish their program, get some training, and be out in industry working for maybe 2 to 3 more years than someone finishing a PhD. So there are definitely advantages to a master's, and I think it's a personal decision to get the PhD. Maybe you feel more fulfilled, maybe you want more time to focus on an area of interest, but as far as the job market, it doesn't always pay to do the PhD, in my opinion.
Oh, that's good to know. That's good to know. So while we are talking about what to look for in the resumes from candidates, can you elaborate a little more on what kind of tips do you have? Let's start with what do you look for in resumes other than their education, in terms of what makes them a right candidate for your team, and also elaborate a little more on if you have any tips on how to get to the first stage of screening.
Early in my career, I got some really good advice on this topic. I had written my resume and cover letter, and I showed it to one of my mentors. And it was all focused on here's what I'm interested in. Here's how this job might fit with my interests. And he looked at this and said, remember why that hiring manager put this call out for a job. They need help. They need someone to come help them. And this is all about you and what you want. You need to think about what that hiring manager might want. Think about what you can immediately bring to the table and make sure that's in the forefront of your resume. So do you know how to use usability studies really well? Have you done a lot of research in the domain? Make sure your resume reflects those strengths. And as an entry-level person, you'll probably have a few gaps where you may not have experience in something. So it's good to lead with your strengths and let that hiring manager know, here's what I can do for you immediately. As hiring managers, we do know that there's not going to be a candidate that knows everything, can do everything. But we do want to see what your strengths are, so lead with those. I think if you have a very unconventional background or maybe a gap, you'll want to use something like the cover letter or something like that, device like that, to help the hiring manager understand your story, why you're qualified and what skills you bring. I've seen a lot of resumes where there's an unconventional background, maybe not direct study in one of these areas that I talked about. And I look at the resume and I'm kind of puzzled, kind of what their experience is, what their skills are. So make sure your resume and cover letter together tell that story. Beyond just your education, I think, when we read these resumes, we don't know what you studied, how you applied that, and how that applies to our roles. So that would be my best advice.
Great. So that's a really great advice. Any other advice that you would give to someone who's doing the best to get into UX research careers today in this economy?
Yeah, well, this economy is pretty difficult. It's challenging for everyone. I think advice I always give to students is try to get an internship if you can. Try to build that into your academic plan. Some of these master's degrees actually will swap out a thesis for an internship. And that's really where you're going to get a lot of great hands-on training, great experience, great stories to tell future hiring managers, experience working across user research, product management, engineering, design. That's my best advice, is to apply to these internships early, make sure you're well positioned to get these internships, reach out and make contacts with people if you're interested. attending industry events like SIGCHI have been important to making those making that network. So I would say those are all really important things that, again, maybe you're going to overlook if you're just so focused on your academic career, but those connections, that experience is really important.
Great. This is super helpful, Steve. Thank you so much for joining us today.
Thank you.
Stay safe, man.